What if one sentence in the US Constitution was supposed to protect millions of Black Americans, but instead became one of the most broken promises in American history? The 14th Amendment is often praised as a cornerstone of equality, but the story of what actually happened after it was passed is far more troubling and far more revealing. In the summer of 1868, America was trying to rebuild itself from ruins. The Civil War had ended only 3 years earlier. More than 600,000 people were dead. Slavery, the system that shaped the nation's economy, politics, and identity, was finally gone. But freedom on paper didn't mean safety, citizenship, or dignity in real life. Formerly enslaved Black Americans were being beaten, arrested, driven off land, and murdered, often with the approval or direct involvement of state governments. The 14th Amendment was written for this moment. Its language was bold and revolutionary. It declared that anyone born in the United States was a citizen. It promised due process of law and equal protection of the laws. This was not abstract theory. It was a direct rejection of the Supreme Court's infamous Dred Scott decision, which had ruled that Black people could never be citizens. The amendment was meant to force states to respect Black freedom and to give the federal government the power to intervene when they didn't. For a brief, fragile moment, it worked. During Reconstruction, federal troops enforced civil rights across the South. Black men voted, held office, and helped write new state constitutions. White supremacist terror groups like the Ku Klux Klan were prosecuted under federal law. The 14th Amendment was doing exactly what it was designed to do, protecting Black Americans from state abuse and private violence when states refused to act. But this progress had enemies, many of them powerful, organized, and patient. Former Confederate elites never accepted defeat. They used violence, intimidation, and propaganda to restore white dominance. And slowly, the North began to lose interest. Reconstruction required money, troops, and political courage. Many white Americans decided equality was too expensive, too disruptive, and too inconvenient. Then came the courts. In a series of decisions starting in the 1870s, the Supreme Court began to hollow out the 14th Amendment from the inside. In slaughterhouse cases, the court ruled that most civil rights were not protected by the federal government at all, but by the states. In United States v. Cruikshank, the court said the federal government couldn't prosecute white mobs for massacring Black citizens. These rulings sent a clear message: the amendment would exist, but it would not be enforced. By the time federal troops withdrew from the South in 1877, the promise of the 14th Amendment had collapsed. Southern states moved quickly. Black voters were erased through poll taxes, literacy tests, and outright terror. Segregation laws, later known as Jim Crow, turned racial apartheid into everyday life. Lynching became a public spectacle, and the federal government, armed with a powerful constitutional amendment, chose not to act. The ultimate betrayal came in 1896. In Plessy v. Ferguson, the Supreme Court ruled that segregation was constitutional as long as facilities were separate but equal. With that decision, the court didn't just abandon the 14th Amendment, it openly reversed its purpose. A law meant to protect Black Americans from state discrimination was now being used to justify it. And here's the twist few people talk about. As Black Americans were denied protection, the 14th Amendment didn't disappear, it was redirected. Courts increasingly used it to protect corporations, contracts, and wealth. Companies claimed equal protection. Business owners claimed due process. The amendment became a shield for economic power, while racial terror continued unchecked. The law hadn't failed by accident. It had been repurposed. It wasn't until the mid-20th century that the amendment's original spirit began to reemerge. Through decades of Black resistance, court cases, protests, boycotts, and sacrifice, the 14th Amendment was forced back into relevance. In Brown v. Board of Education, the Supreme Court finally rejected segregation. The Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act gave the amendment real teeth for the first time in generations. But even then, the victory was incomplete and temporary. In recent decades, courts have narrowed voting rights, limited equal protection claims, and upheld systems that produce deeply unequal racial outcomes. Once again, the question isn't what the 14th Amendment says, the question is whether those in power are willing to enforce it. The history of the 14th Amendment isn't a story of confusion or legal accident, it's a story of choice. Again and again, America chose order over justice, comfort over equality, and power over principle. The amendment still exists, its words are still there, but its meaning has always depended on who is willing to fight for it and who benefits when it's ignored. The 14th Amendment was meant to protect Black people. What happened next tells us far more about America than the amendment ever could.